Welcome to Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. I'm AK Kamara.
And I'm Jai Hansen.
Welcome to the show. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that share button, share it across all of your social media platforms. This podcast is about having meaningful conversations about the things in life that make us black and blue. And we've been kind of going back and forth with people running for office. We've had musicians. We've had political activists. We've had community leaders. And tonight's guest is someone that is not unfamiliar with the
Might be all of the above.
Getting beat up in the media, whether it's because of her political stances or anything really going on in life. And she's also the co-host of another podcast that I've been listening to for a long time called Wrong About Everything. And we have Amy Koch.
Hey.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, gentlemen.
Thanks for coming on.
Me.
Like, I always think of how I introduce someone, and you have so many titles, right? You were the first female state Senate majority leader.
Correct. First
right?
and only.
First and only. And, you've been a political strategist since you left the Senate. And, I see you on TPT Almanac. I see you on, all different types of shows, kind of putting out your political opinions and giving your strategery, of what you see going on.
Yeah, people, I don't know, they have me on to talk strategy, and I love it because I grew up in politics, and when I was 8, I decided I was going to be the first woman president.
Yeah.
Still time now.
Yeah.
And so I love it. I love talking politics. I love being involved in politics. I got hooked at a very young age.
Do you have a favorite, idol politically that you look up to?
Well, I mean, there's the usuals, right? So Reagan is an obvious. I would say that I really liked Jack Kemp. I kind of grew up in that era, and I just felt like he was, just super smart. My dog is named Margaret Thatcher, which angered a lot of Brits. She went viral in the first week with the super left. Brits and the Irish. Yeah. They did not care for her name. Yeah,
we got your dog after the great Margaret Thatcher.
Right, named her after Margaret Thatcher, who I love, and that didn't go over well there. It was like 6 million anger. It was a lot.
That's crazy.
It was like 6 million impressions of like.
But I think maybe this is like an American concept because my wife and we named our dog Billy after her grandfather who had passed away. Oh. And so, maybe it's an American thing that you name after things that
it's
you
an
really
honor,
enjoy.
right? It's an honor to name
and you love
pet
your
that
dog.
You love.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it was the cutest little
part of the
picture. She was
family.
a brand new baby puppy, and I was like, meet Margaret Thatcher. You can call her Maggie. And back here, it was like 300 or 400 people were like, oh, cute. Here's my dog. Blah blah blah. All the cutest little stuff. And then like a week later, I do a bunch of international TV. So I do BBC and TRT World News and Global, all the national Canada, national New Zealand. But I was doing a bunch. That was January 6th. That was the week of January 6th. Okay. So I was on TRT World News, which is Istanbul and London, like 3 times that week. So at some point, someone must have gone to my Twitter, and I had the brand new picture up of Margaret Thatcher, and all of a sudden my Twitter exploded. And it was a little PTSD because, I have had some Twitter moments in my career. Yeah. And this was kind of a harken back to that. And I was like, block, trying to stop it. And finally I just muted everything. I was like, that's it. And I looked back later. I was like, oh, they were not happy.
So this is another kind of side question. When you think of great political strategist minds, you might have, Lee Atwater or Karl Rove, what was Bill Clinton's guy? I can't remember his name.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. How do we forget him now?
James Carville.
Yeah.
Oh. So, I think about those type of strategists, Axelrod, is that something that you kind of try to live up to those standards of, pouring through political data? Or do you like to kind of approach it from more of hey, I've been in politics and I want to kind of talk to an everyday person level?
Yeah, I really approach it a little different, right? Yeah. I do watch the polls and I use them as like a measuring guide, but mine is much more like in 2010 when I was running, because that's how I ended up being the majority leader. I was running the elections for the Senate. We had not been in the majority for 40 years. Yeah. We were in a super minority. Yeah. We could not even uphold a veto by Governor Pawlenty. And that night we picked up 16 seats. We needed 13, which is overwhelming.
Wow, yeah.
But we picked up 16. It was the largest turnover of any Senate in the country. But we didn't do any polling because we didn't have any money because we had been in the minority for 40 years.
Right.
No one ever thought the Republicans were going to be in charge of the Senate, which is funny now because this last decade now, since then, it's like breaking the 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
Now we've been in power more this decade since we did that than not, right? And so, but at the time, no one gave us any money. So I had no polls. All I had was like every week I had like 22 targeted races. Yeah. Every week I had to talk to them, the campaign managers. I was like constantly on the phone. And then I was out there door knocking. Yeah. And that was it. It was always on the road, on the street, and just like going with my dad used to call it a swag method in business, the silly wild ass guess. And that is swag. And that's what I'm like, well, what's going on? Yeah. And I'm telling you, it's remarkably accurate. I knew in 2010. I knew. Everybody was like, feeling. Oh, I knew. I knew. I had no doubt. I pulled staff from people. I pulled staff from an area where then that Democrat candidate gave like 10 grand to his caucus in the last week. Yeah. And I was like, whew, somebody's going to be really wrong on election night. I hope it's not me. And it wasn't me. And we overwhelmingly took that district, and I had pulled staff that week. Yeah. Because it's just, you gotta, it's all you can feel it. You can know if you're not, and you can't delude yourself, right? You have to try to stay like realistic about it. But everyone told me I was out of my mind in 2010.
So now we want to know.
Yeah.
2022. So you're really good at this. That's why we have you on. So let's talk about what's going on now with the races.
Let's talk about your initial gut feeling. I know you're not in the thick of it the same way that you were when you were,
But I've been door knocking all. Yeah. So my gut right now tells me that latest KSTP poll, which has like Walz up, Simons up, Schultz up, Wilson up, is correct. I don't believe that it's going to be that large of a margin. I think the numbers, I don't believe 7 points. That's hard for me. 7 points either way strikes me as too large. But that's what it's, when I talk to people, I mean, I'm talking to like, center right folks, right in the suburbs. Yep. And just like it's anecdotal, but I'm hearing a lot of the same. I'm hearing that poll. I'm hearing they're like, well, like, so I'm gonna like, I can't. Keith Ellison's got to go. Like, I think I absolutely think that's done. I think Jim Schultz is going to win that. I think he's going to win it, well, and it's going to be amazing. First time in 51 years that the GOP is going to take that seat. First time. Yeah. But there's hesitation when it comes to Jensen and Crockett. I'm not saying it can't be overcome. It might get overcome because like turnout. I don't want to like be a politician and say that, but it just seems like the folks I'm talking to, they're like, well, they're splitting their ballot again, which Minnesotans were notorious ticket splitters. And then the last couple of election cycles, we've sort of backed away from that. It feels like we're doing that again. It just
so Amy, do you think they're going to leave certain races empty? Or do you think they're going to split?
It's going to be a combination. Right. I know some Democrats that are not voting in the AG race. They're hesitant to vote for a Republican, but they will not vote for Keith. And they would have last time done the same thing, or maybe even voted, but they're hesitant. And the same thing with the Republicans. I hear a lot of some of the center right I know are like, well, I don't like Walz. I don't like what happened. I hate what happened with the pandemic and Minneapolis and all of that. But there's hesitancy. So I think it's going to be much closer. I think that poll was off in the numbers. That doesn't 7 points is quite a bit.
Lot. And so
it was 10 points in 14 or in 18, which was a terrible year for Republicans.
Yeah. And so that's the thing is before the show, I told you that I like to look at Real Clear Politics because they just do a really good aggregation. They don't necessarily throw in as much fluff like Nate Silver and 538. It's always like his mastermind brain analytics or whatever, right? Whereas Real Clear Politics, they have a little bit of that. But looking at the Minnesota race, Real Clear Politics puts this race as a toss-up. And when you look at a lot of the Survey USA polls, that first one that came out was like, what was it? Like a 20 point?
It was like 18. Yeah.
Like that to me was like, come on.
No.
Like, come on.
I don't even know.
I don't even know how you publish that and like have any credibility or like this.
But those other races were within.
Right.
They were in that same poll.
Yeah.
That was 18 points. The other races were much more in line with what has been all the polls ever since. It was like that weirdly weird. I would have made me stop just with that, right? To go, really? Jim Schultz is within 5 points, but it just didn't.
And
but
so,
anyway.
Like from that perspective, though, looking at the polling data leading up to where we at where we are at right now, the thing that I keep on seeing is a lot of these polls had Walz under 50%. And so it's like, well, what are undecideds going to do? Well, this most recent poll put him above that 50% threshold, which I think is significant,
Just
right?
above,
but just barely above it. But I think the thing that's so mind-blowing to me, and you can probably speak a lot more to this, I've only been involved as an activist. I've never been on the official side of things since 2006. So I see things as purely from an activist perspective. But Minnesota seems to walk its own path. Like you're hearing that in Miami-Dade County in Florida, based off of the results of absentee ballots, Republicans actually have an advantage in absentee ballots in Miami-Dade County, which would be the equivalent of Hennepin County.
Right.
And Republicans have an advantage in absentee ballots, and young people are the ones doing absentee. The older folks are the ones that show up. That could flip. That would be insane. But here's Minnesota, and we're like, oh yeah, we just might go with Walz again.
We just do
What
it,
is
don't
that?
we? I
What is
don't
that
know.
thing?
It's like we're almost contrarian, right? Like everybody else is doing this, so absolutely not. We did Jesse Ventura. We had at the same time Rod Grahams. This was years ago, right? We had a very stalwart conservative Republican with Paul Wellstone, who was, to say the least, not.
No, yeah.
Right? I mean, he was one of the most progressive, and we had a stalwart conservative at the same time in the U.S. Senate. We just like to do that. We just are. I think it's about our fairness. It's about our kind of let's balance this out a little bit. Although I will say, in the past few years, we've been trending more red. Right there. Oh, yeah.
I suppose, when you look up at the 8th and down the 7th and down in the 1st, you have these huge rural pockets that are losing the traditional labor Democrats. I think I saw something that MNGOP had put out. Pete Stauber got a Teamsters endorsement, and a bunch of Teamsters unions up in northern Minnesota are endorsing Republicans.
Right.
And so I think that's that shift. But the question is, if you get a high urban turnout, then that typically favors the DFL. But this year, one of the things I wanted to kind of throw out there, you can go to the Secretary of State website and you can look at absentee ballots requested versus absentee ballots received. And the absentee ballots as of today are less than 2014. So that's curious. And my question to you is, what kind of impact do you think that would have in general if you have lower absentee ballots than basically the last 3-4 elections? Do you think that bodes better for Republicans, and maybe there's an uncaptured essence that people aren't seeing?
Possibly. But I also think this is a year where kind of everybody's wanting to get to the polls because we've had 2 cycles of not. And so people are a little excited just to go. I know I am. I voted absentee mostly because I'm working usually on election day. But this year I'm just excited to go and be there and cast my vote.
So are you one that's there right away at 7 o'clock in the morning?
I generally, because it's just better, right? I get my vote in. It's like working out or something. I'm like, oh, okay, I voted. I did my good,
Yeah. Have the sticker, put it on social media, show everybody. Yeah.
Yep. I'm trying to think. The other thing that Republicans can't ignore, we've been really trending in Greater Minnesota, where we've been shedding is in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And we have not picked that back up because let's just go back 10 years. In 2010, now 2010. Let's just go to 2010. Edina, Egan, Woodbury, all these that now no one even thinks about as a Republican area were absolutely, unquestionably. I remember when I was and they were talking about gold in Edina and how we won't lose Edina. Are you kidding me now? People would laugh at that right now, and that was just 10 years ago. We had all those suburbs.
Do you think that's going to change a little bit with the crime issue going on?
It's absolutely right. We're winning it back. But the problem is, we also have to have candidates that can play in both, right? So we have to be mindful of that when we're picking candidates, when we're endorsing candidates, when we're voting in primaries. If you just want your person and you don't care if they win or not, well, that's fine. But I care about electability because I want to get things done.
Yeah.
I always felt like that. When I was in Wright County, right? I could have run in Wright County and won. I could win every time. I didn't have to door knock. I didn't have to do anything. I could have sat on my hands and won because it's Wright County and I was the Republican on the Senate,
Yeah.
But I never wanted to do that, which is why I took over the elections and why I did, because I thought, like, what good is it for me to go to the Senate and sit in the minority? Nothing.
Yeah.
I'm not getting anything actually moving for the people that want me, that elected me to go do those things. I can go vote no, but what am I doing? I'm not stopping anything.
Yeah.
I'm not even putting the plow in and slowing things down barely. So like, I just, how I approach politics is like action. That's fine. You can have your high-minded thoughts, and I can debate with the best of them, and I will get, riled up and start, like with anybody. But ultimately, in the end, I want to get things done. I want to accomplish those things that we talk about in those rooms. I want to go, I go to the caucuses and I hear everybody talking about things, and that's great, and I'm with you. But then we got to do the stuff that needs to get done to get that happen. And I feel like we've been really getting into the policy of it and losing the politics of it.
So that's kind of what I wanted to pick your brain on. Is, again, the way that you view things is not through a lens that I think the average activist would look at. And because you've had to deal with activists, and I don't say that in like a disparaging way. I know, sometimes you have conversations with people that have never really been an activist, but they've been elected. And sometimes there's almost like activists are just so wild, and I just can't necessarily understand their perspective. But I think that it's important to try and look at these things. So in Minnesota, obviously, we have Jensen. Jensen won that endorsement. And I truly think it's because he really got a lot of activists truly behind him, and he had that energy kind of going into it. And obviously, it was a very, very big field. But I think that, the outcome of that, right from the jump, you had a lot of people that were kind of, I'll call it the strategy class. We're saying, we blew this one. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, but
what's
that
your
ignores
opinion?
the mayor of Lexington.
Yeah.
That ignores him.
Yeah,
That's who had the energy.
Yeah.
And then he threw his weight at the end behind Jensen, and that's what put him over the top. Jensen was down. Jensen was losing, and he'd been in the race a lot longer with a lot more money.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a fundamental misread of that. And also, I came from activists, right? My first foray, or when I was in my 20s, somebody asked me to be the secretary of my BPOU.
Sure.
And let me tell you, there's no more thankless job than the secretary
There is
of
none.
the BPOU.
No.
It's the worst.
Because you're the one that takes all the notes.
To all my secretaries of BPOUs, God bless.
Shout
and
out
thank
to
you.
the
Thank you. Shout out to the BPOU secretaries. Basic political organizational unit. That is what that is. It's the lowest. Anyway. But so that was me. I went to my first conventions. I was a Brian Sullivan delegate. I wasn't a Tim Pawlenty person.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You were talking to an activist.
Yeah. You were against the grain.
I was completely against the grain, and I still am. I just, and I would still be Brian Sullivan, by the way, because I think he was a really good candidate, and he reflected what I wanted, and he was electable as well. Like I just think you have to approach it with like different sides, and I think that Scott did some things really, really well, and I think that's paying off, and I don't think he made. Until recently, I don't think he made like big mistakes. I think he made some mess. He had a bad summer.
Sure.
He had a bad summer. That's what I would say, and that's been hurting him and haunting him a little bit.
So as you've like been out there, and you have a lot of people that you still support because some people probably know this, that you still are an activist. Like you actually, like it's funny. I'll be out and about, and you and I don't think we've ever had like a personal, like one-on-one, in-depth, heart-to-heart conversation. That's how I usually define when someone asks me, "Do you know this person?" So Jai asked me, he's like, "Do you know Amy?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know of her. I've been around her a million times." But I was like, I've never had a meaningful one-on-one, heart-to-heart conversation with her. But I've seen her everywhere, and I think that speaks to like you're always out there, right? Like you're door knocking, you're lit dropping still, and so you're never too above it. What's your I guess, what are you hearing from people? Do you think people are energized? Do you think there's a lot of newer voters that are going to be turning out? Or
and also in the metro, I'm curious about Ramsey, Hennepin, what you're hearing in those areas, because I think that's how the race is going to go.
Well, I think so. I am seeing energy, and I do guide to that. Like I'm seeing the crowds that Jensen's getting, and they're good. A little concerned that those crowds are just in Greater Minnesota. Like I want to see some of those big crowds in Plymouth.
Sure.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Now, they're possible.
Yeah.
CD3, I know those folks over there. They can get the crowd, but that's what I would like to see that. I think where the Dems are going to have big problems is they have entirely overestimated the Minneapolis, the Hennepin and Ramsey County play, right? Ellison, and in the past it has worked for him, has said, listen, I'm not really concerned with the rest of the electorate.
Yeah. I'm
going to drive out my base vote and not just the base vote in Hennepin and Ramsey, but obviously that's where the numbers are, right? Like that's where the high percentage of, and that's where the people are. And I think his support of that charter, ballot two which was getting rid of the public safety department, which everyone saw as supported by the defunders.
Wait, I thought he said he doesn't want to defund the police. Is that different? Is that a different Ellison?
It was everybody knew who was behind, like the people behind that charter amendment were the folks that supported defund, right?
Yep.
And people are not dumb. The electorate is not dumb. Hennepin County voters are not dumb. They know what it was, and they are voting accordingly. And I think that if you saw that poll, that was like there was a big gap with how Walz, who did not support that charter amendment, was doing versus how Keith Ellison was doing, who did support it. And I think that's going to go down when they look back as a big mistake.
So what is your prediction when it comes to the governor's race?
I mean, I don't have to
look. We got me and AK.
This is not what I want to happen.
Yeah.
I think Walz pulls it out. I think it's really tight, and it is very hard for Minnesotans to win, or Republicans to win statewide. 2010 was a blowout year, bigger year than this. The generic ballot right now is about a +3 for Republicans, which is great. We're going to win a lot. In 2010, it was a +9.
Oh, really?
Just for comparison. So we are not in 2010 territory.
For Minnesota?
The overall RCP generic ballot.
Okay.
It was a +9. It's a +3 now. So it's just a comparison. So it's not that good. And even in 2010, Tom Emmer lost.
Yeah, that's
He
right.
lost by 8,500 votes. Like we got
it
was this close. So we could get this whisper close and not pull that one out. Now it's a tough one. I feel very differently about the AG's race. I feel Republicans go vote, but I think that Jim Schultz is going to win this one.
AK, governor's race.
I think it's going to be Jensen.
All right.
And here's my reasoning is I do think that turnout will be down in Hennepin and in Ramsey. And I think that great state, outer state, and the suburbs, I think he's getting the suburbs. And that's going to be the thing that I'm going to be looking at. So Kelly Fenton is a good friend of mine, and me and her have a lot of conversations. And she remembers how bad it sucked that she, all these people were in 2018 were like, what's going on? How are we losing? Like every suburb that was Republican lost in 2018, right? And she feels this really positive energy. And I think that as that goes, I hope that it translates through, but Minnesota's so weird. There could be people that say, leave it blank and then go down. And that's going to be what I'm going to be looking at is, are you going to track the numbers? And if you see that Schultz is leading the top vote getter, that's going to be bad news for Jensen.
Here's where I also might be wrong in my prediction. Jensen has got the momentum right now, which really does matter and is hard to gauge what happens in that last week when a lot of people make their final decision in the last week. You and we know around here, right? Well, we know I know where I'm voting. As soon as the endorsement's done, I'm like, okay. But a lot of people are making it in this last week, and the momentum right now is Jensen. So I will say that.
Stranger things happen, yeah.
What are you hearing about the debates? How big of a deal is that going to be when it comes to the governor's race?
So this is interesting. There was the governor not showing up for that debate hit harder. And why I'm surprised, I ran the Karen Housley, I ran her U.S. Senate race. Karen is a very good friend. Mm-hmm. She ran against Tina Smith for that special, right? So Tina was appointed, and then Karen ran. Well, 18 was a bummer of a year. But that was the first debate that KSTP hosted where if you didn't show up, you had an empty podium. And and by the way, you're welcome because we fought hard for that. Yeah. The rules laid it out that there would be an empty podium if you didn't show up. And then when it came to it, Tina just decided not to show up, they fought us and they said, no, there won't be a podium. We're not going to do that. I said, no. The rules on which we agreed have this podium.
That's awesome.
And they fought it back and forth. And frankly, it was Javier, my friend on the other side, arguing, trying to get rid of that podium. And I was like, nope, these are the rules. These are what were established. Everybody knew it going in, and she agreed not to, and we agreed. So we had an empty podium for Tina. Now, it didn't get as much attention. This got a lot more attention. I think that I don't know why Wiles did it. I don't know why he did it.
Especially when
he hasn't tanked these.
Like when they were advertising it and they were showing that it was just the 5.
It was so
like,
good.
and that
what
was
a terrible
weeks
decision.
beforehand. Like you just couldn't just like, oh man, I guess I'm gonna do something different. So when it comes to the AG's race, Jai and I have actually had like debates about this. I'm like, there's no way that the AG is going to be the top vote getter, but you have a feeling that could be possible.
Well, sure. I mean, first of all, look at what even happened in 2018 with Doug Wortlow, who, was not the candidate that Jim Schultz is.
Yeah.
And he got the closest that anybody got because it is. And I don't want to take anything away from Jim Schultz.
Sure.
He's a first-time candidate. He's run a good race.
Yeah.
He's a good candidate. It's not just one thing that makes somebody right. He had to have a good year. He ran a good race. He's a good candidate. Also, Ellison is very disliked, and that is it. He is the most disliked person on the ballot, right? Yeah. He's for most of Minnesota, he's way too left. He was the deputy chair of the DNC.
That's right.
Right? He's so progressive, and that is just not where Minnesotans are.
Isn't it weird that he's like trying to run from that progressivism like in these last 3 weeks?
It's funny watching it. I mean, it's funny watching the KSTP debate when he's saying all these things, that he's not a defunder, that he supports law enforcement, and he has the county attorneys on his side. That it's not accurate.
It's so funny because you can see the desperation because if Keith cared about principle and not about power, he'd be like, absolutely, and here's why. But I guess there's something to me that if someone knows that they're going to go down because their message is losing, like Chesed Boudin, perfect example. Chesed Boudin out in San Francisco when he got recalled, he was like, I don't care. This is what I believe. If you vote me out, too bad. I'm going to,
Yeah.
But at least I'm like, I think he's terrible. I think all of his beliefs about crime and everything are bad. But mad respect to the dude that's going down saying this is what I believe.
Going down with the ship.
Whereas Ellison is like, that's not me. Who are you talking about? Pretty soon he's going to have on Saturday an ad's going to drop and he's going to have American flag waving behind him.
Well, and don't underestimate the DFL turnout machine either. Republicans know that they have a machine, and frankly, we have less of a machine.
Yeah, we always have.
We always have.
It's
well, how do you change that? I mean, what's the...
Well, we've been missing a solid party apparatus for a decade or more.
Feels like to me.
It's been a long time. So the DFL, love Ken Martin or hate Ken Martin, he has steered that ship. And they're just more coordinated, right? Their outside groups give and they all spend the money the same. They agree on how they're going to spend the money and they go out and spend it. And we just don't have that. We have our factions. We have factions, and our big donors are kind of splintered. We have the Freedom Club.
Yeah.
Then you have the chambers are kind of they kind of support both, but maybe lean a little more Republican. You've got who else is out there? Who are some of the big monies? And but they have their own message. They even have sometimes their own candidates.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not supporting even the same Republican.
You might have Bob Cummins is doing this.
Yes.
And then you got over here, you got Hubbard doing this. They're all funding their own people. It is super interesting. So when it comes to Attorney General, you feel real confident about that. What about Secretary of State? This is kind of the other one that it's just so weird. It's up and down.
I feel like I'm going to win a bet on this race.
Yeah.
AK is going to own me. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
I'm kind of, again, I'm from this mindset that I just feel that Minnesota is not going to split this time. They're going to go strong. They're going to go ride with the Republicans. That's what it feels like. And I know that, like you said, it kind of has been doing that more lately. But then I was looking back through 2020 and 2018, and I'm like, so weird. What you look in 2020, up in the 8th, actually, no, sorry. I think it was 2016, up in the 8th. And you see what Trump got versus what, who won in 16 up there? Was it, I don't think it was Stauber. It was whoever
Nolan, right?
Nolan. So it was a 15-point difference. I was like, what the heck is this? So that's the thing, and Minnesota does weird things, but it feels like now it's kind of coalesced, where it's Pete and Trump were almost right there. But when it comes to Secretary of State, I think there's so much information out there, and she's the only candidate, Kim Crockett, that people have been able to paint as an election denier, based off of Biden's speech last night, saying if you vote for an election denier, you're voting against democracy. And I think she's the only one in the statewide race that can have that label. I don't think they can call Jensen an election denier, but
yeah, I think Kim made some missteps, right? Because I actually don't think she's as extreme. I've met her. I don't think she's I'm like, but she actually on the stump went out and said whatever was it like I'm the election denier, and she was like,
no, that's what I'm saying, right? She
where was her campaign?
She embraced that thing.
Where was her campaign?
What about the Trump endorsement with her?
Well, I think those. Here's what I say with those. I think that came in too late to actually help or hurt.
Yeah.
That was just a 2024 play for Trump.
Yeah.
Right. So then, if they win, he can go, look what I did. I put him over the top.
Yeah.
So she didn't really. Jensen certainly didn't embrace it, right? Like, you look at his stuff, you didn't know that he got it. Nobody knew he got it except the media was all over it. But so this is weird because just going back, typically those down ballot races, by that mean the AG, the Secretary of State, and the Auditor. Most people don't know what the Secretary of State and the Auditor do. Let's just,
true.
Right? Tell me, and so. Usually that's just more of a generic ballot, right? So as goes things, so goes things. Yep. Emmer lost in 2010. The whole slate lost. 2014, same thing. Like we don't win statewide in one area where we don't win in the other. And that was the case with Pawlenty. We won Pawlenty. We won Mary Kiffmeyer, Secretary of State. We won Auditor. We had that slate.
Yeah.
Not the AG, but everything else we won. And so. I'm surprised that people are sort of separating this out as much as they are because there's just not a lot of money on this. This is not a big race. The auditor's race, that's going more generic ballot, right? And that is not to take anything from Ryan Wilson and his team, Jennifer DeJournette. They are doing a good job. Again, a good candidate in a good year running a clean race, right? Yeah. He is not mad missteps for a first-time candidate. He's running a good race. They're doing a good job. But basically nobody knows what that is. Nobody knows who Julie Blah is. Nobody knows who Ryan Wilson is. Nobody knows what the auditor does.
Yeah.
By the way, they audit state and local units of government.
They do.
Not state government, and we should be getting rid of this office because it is vestigial and it is stupid, and we should get rid of it.
Hear, hear.
And save millions of dollars, by the way. It is so dumb. The legislative auditor could do it, and it's dumb. But anyway, so I will support anybody who runs to shut that office down.
So when you look at the races across the board, again, the governor and the other constitutional officers, could you see a scenario where it's Schultz and Wilson win, and basically, Walz and
that's my prediction. That's why I was saying that poll, which is what it showed.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm feeling on the ground. I feel like it's right. I feel like it's right to the point where I don't think it's gonna be that. I don't think it's gonna be that wide of margins on anybody's side. But I think it's gonna kind of fall along those lines.
That'll be interesting. So how does that?
How
does that government work? Where you have a Republican AG, Republican state auditor, and then you got a Democrat governor, Democrat Secretary of State.
Well, we've always had, a lot of times have had a split when we've had a Republican governor because we've not had that AG's office for 51 years. So that's fine. And the auditor is kind of their own entity. They deal with cities and counties and they do their own thing and hopefully keep an eagle eye on that. So those are largely separate offices. The bigger thing to watch is if Jensen doesn't go over the top, we are going to have a Republican Senate. We're going to hold that, and we're going to have a Republican House. Of those two things, I am certain.
Yeah, because we have 15 House seats that are kind of, at least this is MinPost, they're basically up for grabs, and most of them are
and they need
BFL,
5.
Right, and then there's 5 Senate seats, so maybe having even a strong majority in the Senate. So we flip that, and we get Republicans controlling that. That'll be interesting, and so that's why I'm so it's such a weird thing because if it really does go down, and it's just Republican tsunami in Minnesota. The question that I have for you is, what would you advise against doing? Is there a big policy thing that you would say, don't
if it's
do
all
this?
Free?
If they get the whole slate, it's all Republicans, what would you say would number one thing, don't do this?
Okay, here's all I will say, because when 2010 came and we had won the Senate, which we had not had in 40 years.
I remember.
And we decided to do the marriage amendment and we decided to do the voter ID. Now, voter ID in itself would have probably passed if there hadn't been the dual, right? But there was huge pressure to be we have to get this done because we don't know if this is ever going to last. And then guess what? We made it a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We went in guns blazing. I will say the same thing happened. Remember, like in Kansas, right, this year. So the decision on Roe v. Wade was handed down. And like the next 2 weeks later, Kansas has got it on the ballot.
They did, yeah.
And guess what? It lost terribly in Kansas, which is super right, religious right.
That's not what they got them in for.
No,
That's what
and
people, I
also
think, get
there's just
confused
this, like
about.
this idea of like just so what I would say is we can do a lot of good things, but let's keep a longer view. Let's assume that we are going in there to govern and show people that they've made the right choice on a multitude of issues, whether it's getting your money back because there is a massive surplus on the state level, whether it's cracking down on what's been going on in this state on public safety, whether it's dealing with an economy that everybody keeps telling us is doing great, and yet our wallets are like empty from when we go to the gas station and the grocery store, 2 stops, and you're like, well, I better go home and just hang out because I don't have any money. Like those are the things that the people are upset about. Let's focus on those things. That's why let's not get sidetracked with all our own other things. That's not why you're getting elected, Republicans.
Yeah.
These are the 3 issues that you keep running on that are the reason you're winning. And stay with those.
That's good.
Fix those, and then we can branch off and do some other things.
Then let's see what happens.
Then I got other ideas.
Right? And then, do you think at the conclusion, do you think that Biden is like? I guess the question is, do you think that Biden somehow has this ability, or I should say, Walz has this ability to separate himself from Biden? And do you think that's kind of interesting? Because if you look at some of the polling data, Walz has like 8 percentage points higher approval than Biden does. And why is that? Because Biden basically does whatever the Democratic Governor Association tells him to do.
Right.
And the DNC, like you look at all of his executive orders, they mirror like Massachusetts and all these other Democrat governors.
Yeah, but you also notice he's not here this week, right? Who's here? It was the endorsement from President Obama, right? Yeah. So it's sort of a like, yeah, we're with you, Mr. President, but also just, maybe let us finish this race out. I mean, I'm not seeing him. And if this race is super close, this is a seat that they don't want to lose. I think you'd see him here more if they were, feeling like Biden had a lot of juice.
Right, because Biden went to New Mexico, I think, yesterday or today, and that's, supposed to be a really solid block Democrat areas, and I think that that's making people a little bit nervous out there. There is kind of one last question too, and I'll let Jai throw it up there, but because I've been talking way too much.
No, what is next for the Minnesota GOP? What would you like to see? I want to also know how important is it to get into the urban areas for the GOP party. Why hasn't that happened, and do you think it's important to get back into those areas?
So I think that's an area that the Jensen team has done very well. I've seen that more from their team than I have from many teams in the past. I just think that it goes to, 1, it's the right thing to do. 2, I think we have the right message. I think that there's like a whole electorate there that sort of have just given up to the Democrats, that we should never have ceded that ground, and now we need to work to get that back, work to get trust, right? Mm-hmm. And here's the deal, Republicans, you're not just going to show up one day in St. Paul, in Frogtown, and everybody's going to go, oh, you're with us, okay, cool. There's relationships you have to build, relationships that have been built for years and years and years in Wright County, and years and years and years in Worthington, that are not present for Republicans in Ramsey, Hennepin, and Ramsey counties. So there's just a lot of work we have to do there. I think we can, because we can't keep losing by 80% and expect to hold like statewide offices for very long. But I do think that the Jensen team has done a better job than I've seen in most on that. And then the future, like I said, I hope that we have these good wins and we take them and we do good things with it. Yeah. And we focus on why the people sent us there, do the work of the people, and leave other things to like for another time, perhaps, after we've built the case for that. I know why people are voting Republican this time, and it's the economy, inflation, what's happening with the jobs market, which is weird, right? Like nobody has any workers, and it's a public safety thing. That's why they're voting. And also what happened to their kids, by the way. Yeah. The lockdowns and the learning loss, that's another issue and Republicans, You have to deal with that.
What would you say to the people that are having a hard time voting for somebody with an R next to their name, but leaving that race empty, or trying to convince them to try something else?
Yeah, well, I think that like let's just take. I want to take Jim. I'll take Ryan Wilson, right? Because I've been everybody's going to vote for Jim. But in Ryan's case, right? So Julie Blah has a very nice lady. She's a friend of our podcast, and I actually really like her. She's a nice lady. But her background is she's kind of a political activist. She doesn't really have any, like, she's not an auditor. She doesn't qualifications. Ryan's a business guy. He's a numbers guy. Like that office is not partisan. It's just a numbers office that shouldn't exist, but it does. And so like for folks looking at that race to put an R or a D on that office, it's just not it's not helpful. I would look at the most qualified person in that race, and in this case, I think that's Ryan.
Ryan, yeah.
Right. So that's what I would say. It's like let's look into those races and think about those races. And Republicans have work to do. We have brand issues. We have a suburbs issue, and let's not. What I would also say for the Republicans, whatever the future may be, let's not take these nice wins and go, oh, it's because everybody agrees with us exactly as we believe everywhere around the state. That's not what's happening here. There's different areas of the state that think about things in different ways, and we have to have a bigger group, a bigger tent of Republicans that don't necessarily look and think exactly in lockstep with the folks out in Wright County. I wish they did, because we are awesome, but they don't. Yeah. And we have to acknowledge that and to be effective and to have a long-term success, which is what I want, Republicans need to be thoughtful about that. And that means, right, whether it's Minneapolis, whether it's Edina, or whether it's, Belle Plaine. Yeah. People are different around the state, and we need to have a party that fits for all those folks.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, and I sometimes I plug myself here. I'm almost to 100,000 followers. I'm at like 99.5 thousand.
Famous.
But on TikTok, you hear from a lot of people that they're kind of just sick and tired of the status quo, but they're not hardcore conservatives. They're just not. They're populists, and so I think that what Minnesota has the opportunity to do, if we can actually get a sweep here, which I really do feel that we can, we have to remember that populism with a conservative true north, I think, is the best way to kind of go about things and handle the things that people care the most about.
Yes.
People want to make sure that their kids are safe. People want to make sure that their kids, have a future opportunities. People want to make sure that they can pay their bills. People want to make sure that, honestly, that when you think about taxes and people paying their fair share, people want to know that you're not getting hosed and that the money that's going to government is going to do the things it's supposed to do. Like, keep all that in front of you, because that has been radically changed over the last handful of years. So I think we just got to keep that in mind. I'm a hardcore conservative. Like, I am super hardcore conservative, but I understand that the populism is what would push us, because if you took every single conservative and had them vote, we're going to get 33% of the vote. So we just have to kind of keep that in mind. I loved having you on, Amy. I know that we're running short on time. Love to have you back after we could do some like post-mortem breakdown.
And then you can buy us drinks.
And then I can buy you drinks. Or
you're going to be getting loaded.
I'm going to just get ham sauce over here. Getting ham sauce. Is there anything that you want people to do? Go to your social media?
Oh, sure. Well, so Wrong About Everything. We're going to have our, that's on every Friday. You can catch us on Facebook, or you can download us off iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. So love the podcast. And also Channel 4. Election night. You're going to be, most of us nerds are going to be like furiously bashing the Secretary of State website. Refresh. Oh my God, it's another 2%. Most people won't be doing that, but tune in, because I'm going to be on Channel 4 all night.
Awesome.
Abu Amara is the Democrat, and I'll be on there with Esme, and then also Pat Kessler, who's like old school, is coming back. It's coming back for the night. So a little special treat for everybody. So if you're watching election results on TV, which you probably will be, starting at 4 p.m., we'll be doing the 4 and the 6, and then at 8 o'clock we'll be on until we know what's happening, like all night.
That's awesome.
So, and then Twin Cities News Talk at 6:30 on Wednesday morning. I will be on with John Justice and Brian McDaniel.
Very
so
cool.
Tune in on Wednesday morning.
Amy, we're all out of time for promos.
And I was going to say that Abu Amara is actually my evil twin. He's from Sierra Leone. My heritage is Sierra Leone. My last name's Kamara. His last name's Amara. He went to the U. I went to the U. We both majored in political science, not at the exact same time. But I always see him, like, I'll be like, oh, there's another Sierra Leonean. And he's got Amara, and I'm Kamara. So
amazing.
There you go.
I didn't even put that together.
Now you know.
Now I can't look at him the same.
Now you can't look at him the same. Like, I know the Bizarro you. I'm the Bizarro Abu Amara. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for coming
John.
on.
This
Yeah.
was
Those
great.
of you who are watching, there's one ask that I have: go and vote. Right? Don't have a reason, excuse. Bring every single person. Go to your neighbors. I'm already offering. Like, honestly, I'm going on TikTok, and I'm gonna.
You're gonna drive people?
I'm gonna drive people. I want to get as many people out to vote. Especially, I'm gonna be selfish in this way and say that if someone says, "Man, I don't like how things have been going around in the state," say, "Hey, I'll take you to go and vote." Because we can't take anything for granted. We have to have crazy good turnout. I mean, if you're going to vote Democrat, I'm not going to tell you not to vote. You're still going to vote. But if you
Will you give him a ride still, though?
Yeah, I'd still give him a ride.
Oh,
I would because I believe that that's American right and all that stuff. But please go and do that, and hopefully we'll see how things turn out, and that America's coming back, baby. America's coming back. I'm AK Kamara,
And I'm Jai Hansen.
and you've been listening to Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. Peace.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
So, it's a commission.
The Window Store is your locally owned and operated go-to source for high-quality updates at affordable prices. They specialize in windows, kitchen refacing, roofing, and entry doors. After 20-plus years of going above and beyond for homeowners in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, they are proud to be one of the top home improvement companies in the country. With over 900-plus reviews on Google and an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau, you can count on them to provide you with the best possible experience. Now, they're a company that you can depend on for your current and future projects, all backed by their done right guarantee. They'll provide you with straightforward, honest pricing and ensure that you are getting the best products for your needs installed by trained, licensed, and certified professionals. You can visit them online at www.windowstoreinc.com and let them guide you through every step of the process from start to finish.